Hey, it's your co-host Haley and Caitlin popping in with a little motivation to get your week started off right. Hello and welcome back to the Thriving in Wellness podcast. Today we are talking about diet culture and food rules, and really that we need to let go of some of these food rules. Diet culture gives us a lot of extremes. You have your yes foods and your no foods. It's very black and white thinking. And if you have been listening along with us, you know that Haley and I are not black and white thinking type of people. And so much of what we do is in the gray area.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're eating, there's context matters so much. And that's why these food rules make it really challenging to have these, you have to do these specific things. So I feel like oatmeal comes up a lot in terms of is this a good food? Is this a yes food or a no food?
Mm-hmm.
And oatmeal has been getting a bad rap around breakfast time lately. And so I always explain that oatmeal is a really good source of fiber. And so it's, a healthy carbohydrate in that standpoint. But if we're only eating that, or if we're eating it the way that oatmeal is traditionally eaten with fruit and maybe some sugar on it, that's a lot of carbs all at once. So we need some protein added in. So it depends. It's not
Exactly.
that, yeah.
Yeah. And so what you're saying, diet culture kind of gets us into this all or nothing thinking in so many aspects, but
Yeah.
specifically with these food rules, there's so many diets that I've heard of that are doing red, green, and yellow foods, or just yes and no foods, limited foods. And I think this can actually be helpful for some people in certain contexts, but I think in the long run, it can get very rigid because then people start to fear these red foods. They're like, oh, it's red. I'm not allowed to eat that. It's so bad. It's fattening, XYZ. And like you were saying, there's so much like we talked about last week and with the extremes with social media and everything,
Mhm.
there's nuance when it comes to nutrition, so that context matters. So you were giving that oatmeal example, and another thing would be what we would recommend to have for right before a workout. So if you were waking up in the morning going straight to a workout, we'd probably recommend you have straight up carbohydrate to give you that fuel.
Right.
Versus if we were talking about what you eat for your actual breakfast, if you're waking up just eating breakfast and going along with your day, that would be quite different. We don't want you to just have that carbohydrate. And so in those scenarios, maybe juice is a great option before a workout, but juice for breakfast otherwise is not going to be what we recommend. But we're not
Yeah.
saying this is a yes or no food or good or bad food. That context truly does matter.
Yes. It makes me think of Noom and Weight Watchers. And
Yes.
when I have patients who have really struggled with those, it's because they have all of these food rules and they get confused of why is this a bad or a red food, and why are these
Quite this
green?
higher in points.
Yes. And it's because those they just have their food rules, and then the foods fall into those categories, but it's not taking into account the context of how they're eating them.
Exactly. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more on our Thursday episode this week when we talk about intuitive eating. But in my experience, that doesn't empower people, right? Because understanding the why behind it, in my experience, has been really empowering for people to understand why a food would be more nourishing versus less nourishing and when they should be eating it, things like that. So some other food rules to that might be popping up for you that we often see would be not eating after a certain time, I'm not allowed to eat past 6 p.m. or I can only start eating at a certain time. Maybe if you've been in that intermittent fasting world, one of my favorite, sarcasm is very much here right now. No white foods, right?
Yeah.
That's a typical one I hear, especially unfortunately, doctors giving that one. No carbs or carbs are bad, or just like specific foods being told that those are a bad food, or that they are fattening, whatever the context is. And like we were talking about before we hopped on here, sure, there's going to be foods that are never super nourishing, like some like those really high processed foods, right? But
Mhm.
what we're talking about is more so even in like the realm of real food, we see a lot of people fearing certain things.
Yeah, like potatoes, bananas.
Yep. Yep. Carrots even. I get
Yes.
people this pisses me off because people are like, oh, I can't have carrots, they're too high in sugar. But then I will see them like the next day eating this super sugary cereal
Yeah.
or like some other really processed food. It's like, you're telling me you're scared of a little bit of carbohydrate in a carrot, but you're willing to eat like that. Just, I don't know what to say when I hear that. So,
Yeah. So our challenge for you this week is to pay attention and see if you have any of these food rules, and get curious about like where did these come from, and is this actually serving you? Is this promoting health in your life, or is this just some like rigid rule that you're following that you maybe, latched on to from a fad diet?
exactly. And then I'll tag on to that too, just to think about before our Thursday episode is not only is this a rigid food rule and how is it serving you, but is there any like true science behind that? Is there anything legit that could back up that food rule? And it could be anecdotal too, like how you feel eating that food. That's fine. It doesn't have to be like there's a ton of research behind it,
Right.
but just getting curious about those food rules and why you have them in your life and if they maybe need to be let go.
Yep.
All right, we will see you on Thursday.